Hi, I'm Lisa Singer. I am the Senior Director, Event Programming at Media Post, and this is Brand Insider BTS, where I get to pull back the curtain on some of the most influential women marketers today. And with me is Mita Mallick, and she is the author of her new book, Reimagine Inclusion, as well as the head of Inclusion and Equity Impact at Carta. So welcome, Mita.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, no, so we've been trying to do this forever. So I am
I
so
know.
glad we were finally able to make it work.
Thank
And,
you.
and I have to say this, you are just, everything you're doing is so impressive. It's okay. You not only an author and your position at Carta, you also are a contributing writer to I think Harvard Business Review, Ad Week, Entrepreneur Media, and others. So, and you also have your own podcast called Brown Table Talk. And
Yes.
so yeah, that's just, I'm exhausted just saying all that. So,
Well, I have no hobbies. I have writing, my friends, my family, kids, and that's it. So
yeah.
writing is my superpower.
Well, obviously, and it's what I love about. So I love your podcast. First of all, you guys are great together. Mita is co-host with that, and but I want to know, because for people who don't know, Brown Table Talk is really about giving women of color some sort of, helping them with leadership, helping them with challenges that you face, that you see that are happening out there. But I know I do my snooping, and
Yes.
I know from things I've read that you didn't always feel like you had the voice, like you didn't have the courage to speak up as a woman of color.
Yes.
Talk about that and what inspired you, what happened that sort of inspired you to now share your voice and be a voice for others?
Well, it starts with back at the beginning. I'm the proud daughter of Indian immigrant parents. I was born and raised in this country with my younger brother outside of Boston. I talk about this in Reimagine Inclusion. I've been chasing inclusion my entire life. I didn't feel included in my community. I was the funny looking, dark-skinned girl with a long, funny looking braid whose parents spoke funny English until it wasn't funny anymore. So clearly in my community, I didn't feel belonged. I also didn't grow up in an Instagram era. I didn't see myself, people who look like me in products and services, commercials, TV, film. And I always thought to myself, like, who makes the decisions? Who has the power to decide who's on screen and whose stories are worthy of being told? And because I grew up painfully shy and introverted, I focused a lot on reading and writing and just loved the power of storytelling. And that led me into a career of being a marketer for many years at large consumer product goods companies. And it was through many experiences that I held onto for a while that I thought, like, why am I not sharing my own stories of what I've been through? And it was with my dad's sudden death in 2017 that nothing like grief that rocks your world and losing someone suddenly, that you start to reevaluate your life. I know we've all had moments like that, but why am I holding on to these stories, and what's stopping me from sharing them? Because all of a sudden I share them and I'm not alone. There's power in storytelling. We all know that, and that there's community and healing. And so that's really been my trajectory. And, with DC Marshall, we started the podcast because there were so many things that were happening to us, to women of color at work, that we weren't talking about. We were like trading text messages or like talking about in the hallway or having late night dinners. And we wanted to shed light on a lot of those stories. But what's really been interesting, Lisa, is that a lot of white men, a lot of allies have stepped up to say, wow, like, we've never heard these stories. Like, we didn't know that these things happen. And that's why the podcast is really for everyone, because we also need allies to step up and think about how can they help women of color win at work.
Yeah, and I do agree with that. I think that there are a lot of people out there who, yes, we have prejudice, people have biases, but there's also just a lot of people who it's more about ignorance, not knowing that this is offensive, or not knowing that this is happening, or, whatever it may be. And like you said, something like your podcast, or something where I feel like we are seeing it talked about now more so, like people talking about these injustices, and just having it as a conversation is a step forward in that sense, I would say.
Educate yourself, yeah. And just to be, I always say with my role, show up with kindness and grace as people are learning. Like, listen, if you're going to make the same mistake over and over again, then that's a conversation. But if it's the first time you're learning, I'm going to allow you the space and grace to learn and help you understand why you can be showing up in a different way in your workplace.
I agree. And almost, because you talk about how your storytelling, you like to tell stories. and you weren't sharing your own experiences, but it sounds like as you started sharing your experiences, you were kind of rewriting your story or
Absolutely. I was reclaiming my power, reclaiming my voice. Lisa, it's sort of unbelievable with the podcast, the number of people in social media who will say, yes, the story of you being renamed or being mistaken for the other brown woman. Yes, 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 it's happened to me. And then there are so many reach outs we get in our DMs where people will say, this is happening to me at work. I can't actually like it or post or comment about it, but I want you to know it's like you're reading my personal journal. And that like really hits home because we're like, wow, this is the power of storytelling. And so many women who have been inspired to make different decisions, so many allies who have said, I'm showing up differently. I didn't realize that by me doing this or acting this way was causing hurt or harm. And so that's why we do it.
yeah, no, it's truly having an impact, and just
Thank you.
your world and hopefully then that extends to even a larger world, like to each person and then goes to the next. And as you said,
Really
it's cool.
yeah.
Your career has obviously, I mean, we've been talking about it. You're a DEI leader, and this is something that it's not only about your work, but it's your passion,
Yeah.
but when you were first graduating, when you were first getting out of school, I mean, you worked for many industries. You worked with Johnson and Johnson. You also were at Pfizer, Unilever, so many big organizations. When you were first getting out of school, did you have that, trajectory, thinking like, okay, I'm going to do something about diversity. I'm going to make organizations more inclusive? Was that even on your radar? Like, how did your career start and evolve to where you are?
Well, I always thought inclusion was a driver of the business. And that's how I just thought about it because it was my lived experience. I thought to myself when I was creating a line of color cosmetics, why don't these lipsticks and blushes and eyeshadows work on my skin tone? And I remember going to the head of product development at the time and I said, this actually, look, it doesn't work. And she's like, well, we'd have to put more pigmentation in it and it would cost more. And I said, well, don't you think there's a market opportunity? Don't you think that people would pay for that? And she was like, no. And so the world has evolved, but I think in every brand assignment I had and every business I touched, I always thought about who are the other voices we could be including? Who are the markets that we're not serving? And I always challenge when leaders are like, there's no growth out there to be had. I'm like, listen, inclusion is a driver of the business right now. Nielsen alone is one source that says there's over $3.3 trillion of spending power with the multicultural consumer. So, when I think about building end-to-end inclusion ecosystems, it's so important. Diversity of representation matters a lot because if you want to serve the Black community and you don't have Black talent who authentically, they have a seat at the table, their voice matters, their voice is heard, how do you expect to serve the Black community with products and services, right? They're so tied together. And so that's where I just fundamentally believe inclusion is a driver of the business.
Well, and you'd like to think that people would want to be inclusive for other reasons than just the bottom line.
But it's all tied. It's all tied. And there's a ripple effect, right? It's all connected when I think about how you build end-to-end inclusion ecosystems. Exactly.
Yep. No, I completely agree. Talk about it. Has there been a challenge in your life that it sort of gutted you and you just, how did you get through that? If there has been, and how did you get through it and how did it impact you?
I mean, I think the biggest challenge in my career has been being the lonely only in many rooms, right? And so I'll never forget, I was early on in my career and I had a vice president invite me to this meeting and it was for a brand I didn't work on. And I walked into the room and there's 15 marketers in there and I was like, oh, makes sense. I am the only person of color in this room and it's a product being targeted to women of color. So I feel like that's one example, but any time where I felt tokenized or the burden of I am the lone voice representing, I think that can be really, really difficult. And I hope the world is changing. The workplaces are changing for the new generation that's coming in. But that's always been, it's a burden still to this day. If you're the only one in the room, you wonder as a woman of color, how am I setting the standard? If I don't really exceed in this role, if I fail, are they less likely to bring in another woman of color after me? Or if I really do amazing, that's going to be great for a lot of other people who I've opened doors for. So I think that's always been the calculation of my career.
Yeah, well, it's a lot of responsibility. I mean, it's not a, I mean, you, instead of it just being about you and what's happening with your career, to feel like you're taking on, this whole.
And I think a lot of women of color I talk to feel that way, right? Especially if you've been appointed to the CMO role or the COO role or CTO. Yeah, you just, there is, right? You're obviously proud, it's amazing, but you also think about, right, this is a big moment, not just for you, but for the people who will follow behind you.
Yeah, because you always hear this is the first Black woman,
Yes, yes.
or whatever it may be. And that in itself puts you at, okay, now I represent every Black woman out there. And
It's really difficult. You don't want to be the last. I don't want to be the first and the last. I want to be the first for a reason, because there's going to be many more who come after me. And so that, I think, is really the really difficult challenge, right, that many of us face.
Yeah. So a young woman of color starting out now in the industry, what are you, because obviously you say you want, hopefully it's changed and they're not going to be facing the same challenges you did, but what would the advice you would give them be right now in terms of trying to, get to the position like you're in?
I think sponsorship is so important. I talk about this in Reimagine Inclusion. I say very boldly and unapologetically, I've been over-mentored and under-sponsored in my career. And I get a lot of flack for that. People say mentorship is so important. I can't believe you're knocking mentorship. Mentorship is really important. You wouldn't have invited me here today if I didn't have a lot of great mentors who got me here to this interview. But what I would say to you is sponsorship is different. Sponsorship is someone typically who is 2 levels above you in the organization. They have the political, social capital, budget. They're in the room when decisions are being made about people's careers. And so they can open doors for you that otherwise wouldn't have been open. So there's a difference. You and I could be mentors after this, right? But you don't sit in my organization. So that's the difference. It's like, I wish I had more people early in my career taking a bet on my career as much as I bet on myself. And to really sit down and say, hey, Mita, here are the 5 to 6 experiences you need to have if you're looking to get on the CMO track or you're looking to be in the executive. And here's the honest feedback I would give you, right? Because too often it's like, oh, you're killing it. Keep doing what you're doing, right? And so find those people who will also give you the honest feedback and make sure that you are gaining those career defining moments and getting the expertise. I think those things are all really important.
Well, that person isn't always in your area in terms of, like, sometimes that person who's the 2 levels above is in another floor, on another floor, or not easily, you don't have access to them necessarily. You try to take it as you can. Is there a way that, what would you say again, young Mita?
So part of it also, I will say, and I talk about this on the Brown Table Talk podcast, I bring my cultural upbringing every day to my workplace. And so my parents gave me a lot of great gifts, including an amazing work ethic, really the ability to be hospitable and welcoming all times, and also the ability to share the spotlight and humility. That hasn't always served me well in my career, particularly with the work ethic. My father, rest in peace, would always say, keep your head down, work hard, stay out of trouble, you'll be recognized. That's not how it works. It's like making a great piece of commercial or film and watching it alone in your bedroom all day long. Like, no one knows that you made it, right? And so same thing with your work is, like, let's say you're listening to this and you're a senior brand manager and you're doing an analysis and ROI on, like, the media investments last year and, like, for the division, and were they worth it? Who do you think might be interested other than your boss and your boss's boss? The CFO, somebody in finance. So start to think strategically about what you're working on and who else in the organization might benefit from it in terms of collaboration. So you might go to the CFO or you might go to a VP in finance and say, hey, I just want to set up some time. I'm putting together this analysis. Here's what I found. They might say, oh, that's really interesting. Could you look at these other 2 things and maybe come back to me in 2 weeks? We'll set up more time. And so you see how I'm building this relationship where it's value on both sides. No one's going to sponsor me just to sponsor me, right? That doesn't how it works, but they're going to sponsor me because they see that I'm bringing value that adds value to them. And then you better believe when the doors are closed, people are talking about your careers. Yes, that was another thing young Mita didn't know, that the doors are closed. People are talking about your career. They're calibrated. And the CFO, my name's going to come up, be like, yeah, actually, I know about that ROI analysis Mita's been doing. I've been looking at it. I think it's great. And so here are the things I've seen come out of it. So do you see, like, I could talk to anybody and look at a project they're working on and help them figure out who else in the organization should know about your work and the value. And what I'm not saying is you need 10 sponsors. You need like 2 or maybe one good one, right? That's what you need.
Yeah. But I think what you said is key, offering value, not just going and saying, hey, can you help me? Or, hey, like show them what
Yes. And you never go up to someone and be like, can you sponsor me? That's not how it works. It's not like a best friend necklace from high school. Here's half, or elementary school. It's like, no, like you're going to want to sponsor me because I'm going to consistently show you how I'm adding value and how it's also helping you. Because here's the thing about what has been widely talked about as a sponsor effect is like, when you're a sponsor, it also makes you look good, right? So imagine to some of the men who are listening to this and thinking about, what's their legacy going to be? Imagine how you're thinking about changing leadership in the C-suite and thinking about how many women you're sponsoring. Like, that's pretty amazing to think about all the women whose career trajectories you can help change.
Yeah. No, I agree. Well, I have to get on to asking you about the book, because really, I mean, as I said, you're already doing, you have a lot of hats, you don't have a lot of free time, as you were saying early on, but yet you took the time to write this book. Why?
Well, I wrote the book 4 years ago. It's been a long journey. Reimagine Inclusion, Debunking 13 Myths to Transform Your Workplace, available right now on Amazon for pre-order. And I wrote it, Lisa, because there's a lot of good books about DE&I right now. It's a big marketplace. But I wanted to write a book that was saying the quiet parts out loud. All of the myths and the stories we tell ourselves that prevent us from making meaningful progress in the workplace. One example I'll give you is one of the myths starts off like, of course I support women. We just extended maternity leave, right? And so really, what is that myth debunking? Is that all women are mothers? All that maternity leave is solving how you can create an inclusive space for women. And I've heard that too often in my career. And really a conversation around gendered ageism, right? Which we don't talk a lot about in diversity, equity, inclusion. It's like women are never the right age. You're either too young or you're too old, right? And so there's like that sweet spot. But those are the sort of things that, and some of the things are just things that we've heard, in passing, or we hear often. I'm all for diverse talent as long as they're good. Another one that I'm personally passionate about as a marketer is our ad wasn't racist. It was simply a mistake, right? And so really getting to the heart of like, why does content go onto the marketplace that's either labeled racist, sexist, homophobic? How do those things happen? And so that's really the purpose of the book. There's powerful storytelling. I love a good story. And then I debunk it and leave tips at the end of every myth. And so I'm really excited for people to read it and for it to make impact.
Yeah, no, because I do agree. I mean, I think that organizations, people want to make a difference, want to see change. I really do think that. I just think that sometimes it's done wrong. And again, we talked about it earlier. It's maybe out of ignorance, maybe not taking the time to really know how to deal with something, and even just like how do you see these major organizations and an ad goes out, and these are huge corporations, and how did that get past all the vetting to get there? Like, it just baffles me. So I think that, as you're saying, it's, sort of the things that are the kind of moments, but that's what people are losing,
I want to just hit on something you said, which I talk about in Reimagine Inclusion, is like, listen to the whispers. They are the loudest. When you see that ad that has gone viral, that has been deemed as being racist, there was probably someone along the way who spoke up, right? I've seen this too often in coaching founders and CEOs. Somebody said, you know what, Mita, this ad makes me uncomfortable. And maybe they didn't have the language, right? And what did Mita say? Oh, it's been tested. Don't worry about it, right? Or something along the lines of, yeah, our consumers are going to love it. Like, I don't think there's a problem there. So just pause when someone comes to you with feedback or says, I'd like to talk about this. Here's what I'm seeing and feeling. Take a moment to listen to the whisper, right? Because that's actually the loudest, and that could actually help change the trajectory of what you decide to do next, whether it's an ad or a decision you're making for talent.
Yeah, no, I agree. Well, speaking of debunking, let's debunk Mita. So what is the one thing or things that people get wrong about you?
That I'm an extrovert. I pose as an extrovert. Someone had this amazing phrase today on LinkedIn, performative extrovert. Maybe I'm a performative extrovert, meaning I, for my job, use a lot of energy, but I, on my downtime, am with my kids and I make very few plans on the weekends, very few social plans at all. So that's probably one thing that I would debunk about me, that I'm not a business leader. I am. You can be a business leader and a DEI executive.
Yeah.
I think that's another myth. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I actually, because you do come across very, but I think I'm the same way in the sense that I think it was a little while ago, a few years ago, I saw it's like an extrovert introvert combo.
Ambivert.
Is that what it's called? And
yes,
so
ambivert, yes.
I can be in front of people, talking away, meeting people easily, but then I want to be alone. Like I definitely
absolutely.
I really feel like that. I think more people are that. Maybe I don't know. I just feel like it's just it's not one or the other. But so yes, I will. So I will not say I don't believe it, because I totally get what you're talking about.
Awesome.
All right. Well, we're gonna to wrap it up. I know you like to in the book you even end with tips. On your podcast you end with tips. So how do we want to end this for the audience? What tips do you want to leave them?
Well, my first tip is go pre-order my book. I'm going to sell, because I honestly think it's going to be amazing. Amazon pre-order, amazing resource for you. But I don't care where you're sitting in the organization. I don't care if you're the CEO, you're the CEO, CMO, you're just starting out as an assistant brand manager. Wherever you are, you can make impact, and think about how you might make a different decision tomorrow. So let's say there's an opening on your team, but you're not hiring for it. You can go to the hiring manager or your boss and say, hey, I'd love to see a diverse slate for this team. Can I help? Can we work with recruiting? Or there's a conference I've seen, I think we should be sponsoring it. Or you know what? I wonder why we go to the same agency every time for our videos and our campaigns. Have we thought about creating an RFP process again, diverse slate for agencies, right? And then also, like we just said, when you see something, say something. It's never too late to intervene when you see something at work. We're all an ally for somebody. And so just stand up for each other. We spend too much time at work, and we're all building these amazing cultures that we all need to be looking out for each other.
And I also think sometimes people, when they don't say something, and I'm talking about maybe it's a conversation, you're in a group and someone makes a comment that you consider racist, biased, just not right, whatever, but not necessarily say something. You know what I mean? Like people might feel like they can't speak out in that group for whatever reason. And I think I talked about it on my last podcast, the same thing. It's like even that little step of saying that's wrong, or speaking up. It's not, not like what you do and you're passing it on, but just those little steps can make a difference.
Little stuff. You can always, in the moment, you can say, that's not funny. I don't think that's a joke. If there is power, there are power dynamics everywhere. If you don't feel like you can do something in the moment, you can always find the person afterwards. You can always find someone else that knows that person to intervene. There is always a way to intervene, even if it's after the moment's passed.
Yeah. And that's great advice, because I do think when you are in a group of higher ups and you don't want to call them out and embarrass them.
Absolutely.
And again, it could be something that they're saying it, not even realizing what they're sounding like.
Absolutely.
All right. One last question. Got to have a little fun. Guilty pleasure. What's your guilty pleasure?
Oh gosh. I get into these Netflix binges. I was watching Beef. Now I'm on to Queen Charlotte. When I get time. Indian matchmaking, and then I moved on to Jewish matchmaking. I've been asking my Jewish friends if it's representative, because I don't, I'm learning about the lived experience of being Jewish, but it was, I get into, get me onto a good series. It's hard.
Like reality though, it sounds like you're like.
Yeah, although Queen Charlotte, I guess that's not. Beef, those were two non-reality.
Yeah, those aren't reality, but then when you're talking about the
and the dating shows, right. Yes.
All right, that's good. So this is a little bit just totally mind candy, I guess.
Yes, absolutely.
I can enjoy. Well, Mita, thank you so much. This is really awesome. I appreciate it. I'm so glad we finally got a chance to do it.
I so appreciate you. Thank you for what you do, and thank you for including my voice and this story. I would really appreciate you. Thank you.
I love that. So, and thank you for watching. And yes, remember, Mita's book is available to order if you're interested on Amazon, and it's smart stuff. So definitely want to take advantage of that. And if you have another, a woman you want me to kind of peel back the onion on, I don't know if that's a great way to say it, but find out more about, please let me know and I will do my best. And again, Mita, thank you so much.